And good morning, Megan. Thank you to be the first one in our chat box today. Well, let's go ahead and kick off, and folks who are still joining can join on in on the conversation. But first off, I just want to welcome our community and our panelists here this morning. I see new faces, I see old faces, and it really just warms my heart to see you all here. So I want to thank you all for registering and attending our very first panel, a values-driven conversation with women and BIPOC leaders. As COVID-19 has in some ways made us feel more separate and divided as a community, we really saw this at Avenue as an opportunity to bring our community together, to learn, to share, and to inspire. And our topic today is Making the Leap, Personal Journeys in Entrepreneurship. And I'm immensely grateful for the 5 panelists joining us today. Each of you are part of my network and are contributing to the Portland business landscape. You're blazing your own trails and have a lot to teach us about persistence, perseverance, and commitment to chasing your goals. So joining us today, I want to introduce Alexis Brawley-James, the owner and chief equity officer at Construct the Present, Nina Byrd, senior strategist at EXP Consulting, Paula Hayes, president and CEO at Noir, Helen Hong, founder and owner of The Cake Batch and also executive chef at BEASTRO by Marshawn Lynch here in Portland, and Jill Kuehler, founder and CEO and distiller at Freeland Spirits. Thank you all for being here to share your experiences and stories with us. And a note to participants, please feel free to submit questions in the chat for our panelists. We've reserved about 15 minutes at the end of our session today for audience questions, and we'll kick off our Q&A with questions from the chat. So with that, if our panelists are ready, we will jump right in. The first question I have for all of you is, what are the values that guide you? How have those values impacted your life, your business, and anything else above and beyond? And with that, I think Alexis, you're up on my screen. I'm going to pass it to you to kick us off.
Sure, I'm happy to start this off. It's an easy one for me. I think my values have driven me to everywhere that I've gone. It's like the car I ride in. Sometimes I'm the driver, sometimes I'm the passenger. But I think the 2 that come up for me the most are really around connection and learning. I consider myself and continue to center myself as a lifelong learner and want to consistently be challenged by growing and expanding both my consciousness and the consciousness of communities that I'm a part of. But I think in addition to that is around connection. I love meeting new people. I love learning about new people and really connecting with where folks, their values really drive them and what's important. And when I think about my business of business consulting through a DEI lens, it really is centered around that connection and learning. How do you connect with people who are different than you, the same as you? And how do you continue to grow and learn even as we head into adulthood and hopefully elderhood?
I love that. I want this to be just open, so I feel like if any of the other panelists want to jump in, otherwise I'm happy to popcorn around. Just what speaks to you with this question about values?
I love that. Shall I? It's like, I feel like particularly women, it's just, of course, we lead our businesses with values. I don't know how anybody wouldn't when you put so much into something. Like, how is it not values driven? And the start of Freeland was really about diversity and celebrating. And we all know how much it benefits all industries, but when you look at something like craft spirits, it's just, less than 1% of our booze is made by women. So I also really celebrate the science part of that too, with women having way more olfactory cells and taste buds. Like, without women making things, it's like there's this whole palette that's missing from the world. And I think that's really exciting. And collaboration is a big value that we run Freeland with. Every product we offer is some form of a collaboration and a celebration. Celebration is a value as well, and celebrating the people and the partnerships.
I love that. And I think can wholeheartedly agree that there's just a different sort of flavor that as a woman or a BIPOC leader of a company that we bring to the table from a culture standpoint, a perspective standpoint, a connection. Alexis, you talked about connecting with others, and I think that speaks to us really here at Avenue as well. So well, I'm going to call on Helen, actually, if you want to share.
Hi. For me, what stands out or is the most important to me is authenticity. Because I am in the art field, in the culinary field, making sure that I'm doing things that are staying true to me and my uniqueness, and especially being Asian, a woman in the culinary field, it's really hard to be in an executive position. So my biggest thing whenever I'm starting off is my team. If I don't have a core team to work with, then we're not going to get further in life. So I've taken numerous pay cuts so that I can distribute and allocate those funds to my team members, because I want to make sure that they're happy, so that we can move forth and prosper in total. And it's never like an individual thing. It's always like a group effort to be where we're at. Another thing, being in the art field, is expressing myself in other ways that people haven't seen before. So like being Asian and coming from 2 refugee parents, what does that look like? And what is the most important thing to me? And it's bringing forth a message, and really the sacrifice that my parents have given for me to be in America and for me to thrive and have the dreams that I do have. And so like that really pushes me forward. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I resonate with that a lot.
Yeah.
Paula, can I call on you?
Sure. You know, a lot of what Alexis, Helen, and Jill really speak to me. I feel like those are all great, great values. The other things that I would add that I'm always conscious of are, first, integrity in all that I do. Integrity in the products that we make, integrity in how we treat our customers, integrity in how we treat our employees. That's incredibly important to me. Second, I built my company around the vision of empowerment. I know how important that's been for me in my career. I'm in the STEM field, and less than 20% of that field is made up of women. And when you look at Black women, it is about 5% or less. And to take that and to take those skills and put it towards products that I love. There were a lot of people that I think tried to trivialize that I wanted to take those skills and apply it towards beauty, but there is a huge need. And so that idea of empowerment for self and for anyone who works for me has been really important to get us to where we are. And then finally, adaptability. It's great. You got to have a vision. You got to have that and drive forward. But there are often things that happen in life that you can't necessarily control, right? But you can continue to propel your vision forward, and you can be adaptable, adaptable to market, adaptable to opportunities in order to get you to where you need to go. And so ensuring that my team understands that we can never be fixed in what we're doing, and that we're all on this train together, moving together. And so we've got to be adaptable. So those are important to me.
Yeah, well, those are such great add-ons. Thank you for calling those out. And yeah, I feel like each and every one of you in your own fields are blazing trails and kind of doing something that really hasn't been done frequently or at all. So I'm very impressed. Nina, I'm going to pass it over to you on the values front.
Yes, I mean, what more can I say? These ladies really echoed everything I believe in. And I'm just going to point out, because I'm a business owner and entrepreneur. So, you talk about, what does the word entrepreneur even mean? And it means adventure. You think of a word like intrepid, like you're going out, you're willing and daring to do something inherently risky, right? And some of us did that by choice. Some of us did that because there wasn't another choice. And so part of my values is having the autonomy, the ability to be independent as well as collaborative. That was something I couldn't find a balance in my traditional corporate America job. Having empathy and seeing empathy expressed. Let's look at the difference between a value and an intention, because we have a lot of conversations now about intentions. But values are expressed intentions. It's great to have an intention. If you don't live that out, it's not a value. And so for me, I wanted to be able to express my intentions in my work every single day without being penalized or worried I wouldn't fit in or things like this. And so the ability for me to be innovative, to be creative, to be collaborative, to be independent are all values of mine that I wanted to express. And I get to do that every day in my work. So exactly what these ladies are saying, our values are why we're here today.
Yeah, that's so powerful. And I'm kind of almost taking away that the values are really kind of a superpower for how we run our business and what sets us apart. And I really love the values are expressed as intentions, what you just said, Nina, and Alexis, thanks for sharing that in the chat. So moving on to thinking about that, the values, but also a moment in time. And it may have been purposeful, Nina, like you said, or it was kind of the only choice that you had, but love for you to tell us about a moment in time or that inflection point that catalyzed each of you to make the leap to start your own business or your personal journey into entrepreneurship. And then how did values play a role in that as well? So Nina, maybe starting with you, actually, we can kick it off with you and then go back around.
I'm like, story time. Yeah, like this is good. I can't wait to hear from all the other ladies. So I thought about this for a while, and there were so many moments. I want to honor the fact that I come from a family of entrepreneurs, which is a very rare thing, of successful entrepreneurs. So there are all these things I observed by osmosis that I didn't really realize were characteristics of entrepreneurs. I just thought it was normal. And so I was able to kind of grow up with some semblance of what it means to own a business and the struggles, the very real struggles that go with that. And I think part of the asset that I have now as a consultant is that I could disseminate the things that I grew up with that were automatic from the things that people actually have to learn or unlearn coming from corporate America to be successful entrepreneurs or CEOs. And so that became a bit of, when we talk about superpowers, that became a bit of a superpower. But I can really remember, I've always done some level of consulting where people have traded time for money, right? My time for money. And it was really blessed. You know, I didn't know until I got to college that other people didn't consult on the side. I was like, you don't have a side hustle? What? You just go to school or whatever? It's like, it was amazing to me. But the difference of just consulting like on the side to making a full-time business, to taking that leap or that risk, was for me really exemplified by my sister. And I don't even think she knows that she's not on the call today, but she showed me, you know, what it was like to take your savings and invest it in an opportunity. She showed me what it was like to have to collaborate and to network and to find a path forward to express her passion in the corporate world. So I think really being able to work with her helped catalyze this moment for me to be able to say, oh, maybe I can do this too. And that was many years ago. I'm so grateful for her.
Yeah. Well, I think you hit on something, risk as well. It's scary. There's risk. And I think that adventure, there's sort of like that lofty picture of entrepreneurship, and there's also the risk side, but I think so much upside and opportunity on taking that journey. So let's see, Alexis, I'm going to pass it over to you on this one.
That's perfect, because I think Nina brought up so many things and I was like, oh yeah, because I think for a long time, my business was just that, a side hustle. It didn't feel, it felt like what I did when I wanted to have fun and my job was like work. And I slowly began to realize that I wanted to spend more time in my strengths and more time doing what I love and less time trying to convince myself to show up to work. And so I was really lucky to have a community that encouraged me to think broader about my impact. I think it became really clear to me that there was something missing in the DEI space. At the time that I started my business, it was much a focus around shaming and blaming folks for not showing up better or being better or doing more. And people oftentimes left trainings about race or oppression feeling run down or hopeless or depleted. And I really wanted to flip that, because I feel like if we think about change as something that is hard work and is going to be uncomfortable and terrible, why would we wake up and do that every day? Instead, if we reframe it in our mind that what's possible to create a world where oppression doesn't exist, that everyone gets to show up how they want to show up, and it's a joyful experience, sign me up. That's something I want to do. And so I wanted to have a broader impact of really creating these communities of people who challenge each other and push back on ideas but stay connected, that it isn't this like, I'm going to point my finger at you and then I never have to talk to you again because you're racist or you're sexist. But how do I connect my experience to yours so that we are in this journey together to make the change? And then, of course, how do I monetize that, right? Because we live in a capitalist society. And so I have to think, how do I turn that into a business? And I think it was a few key people who really encouraged me that I could try it. And they said, what's the worst case scenario? If you fail, you can always go get a job. And I was like, yeah, that's true. And I was like, but what about healthcare? But what about like consistency and safety? And they're like, well, are you really safe if you have a job? Like your employer could fire you any day. How safe are you? And it just really flipped all of the things I believed to be true kind of backwards, like what you're talking about, Nina, unlearning all the messaging that I received about who I should be, what makes me successful. And I'm still unlearning those things every day. Like sometimes 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm like, maybe I should just go get a job. but I want to stay committed, and I'm consistently reminded about the power of other women who have done things before me, and that I'm not the first and I won't be the last. And so what is my legacy and what is the mark that I want to leave while I'm here? How will I leave this space and place better? And that's what kind of my value of really thinking 7 generations ahead, of wanting to make an impact in the world. And every interaction is an opportunity for that. And so I'm really thankful for conversations like this that remind me of my purpose and reconnect me to what I'm trying to do. So.
That was really inspirational, Alexis. And I love that. And I think that's just the message we can all kind of take, is how can we flip things around, make it a joyful experience, and think about the impact that we have, not just in the present, but wow, 7 generations in the future. That's really impactful. And I'll also just say, I mean, I don't know, I'll raise my hand and say I've been up at 2 a.m. thinking, hey, should I go back and get a real job? But I think that's just part of the entrepreneurial journey and the things that you battle through. And once you get to the other side, if there is another side, the purpose and just knowing that you've stuck to your values and are creating something really unique and really impactful is powerful. So I'm going to hand it over to Jill.
So I'm not from the industry, no business background. I was running nonprofits my whole career. I was at Zanger Farm, an educational farm in East Portland, for 7 years. And while I was there, I got to know my good friend, Corey Carmen. She raises grass-fed beef in Eastern Oregon in the Wallowas. And Corey and I became whiskey drinking buddies. It was a fateful whiskey drinking night. And we were drinking some delicious Kentucky bourbon, but just thinking like, what, we don't think of the terroir like we think of, our grapes with our wine, and what the grapes are, how they were grown, who grew them. It's like, why don't we think more of that terroir with our whiskey? And she's like, I've always wanted to incorporate grain production on the ranch. I'll grow it if you make it. And that was really the birth of it. And also when I got really excited at the idea of how can we really celebrate women in these professions where you just don't see many of us, obviously ranching and distilling too. So it's really a celebration of the women of the craft, all the way from the growers to the makers, and who's out there selling as well. So that was the inspiration of it all.
Yeah. Oh, great. Thank you. Helen, I'm going to pass you the microphone.
Oh God. Okay, first off, I love this panel. I'm really excited to connect with all of you afterward. And I want to touch back on legacy. I believe it was Alexis that said it. So legacy is a huge thing that drives me, right? Because I did mention my parents, and I attribute everything that I have ever had to them. Man, I feel like I'm about to cry. Woo! Okay, so for me, I think the biggest thing that stands out about me is my personality and the way that I perceive myself and network with others. I connect really well, and I would say that's for my mom. My mom and dad both have a ton of street smarts because they were in the Vietnam War, and they found a way to escape. Even though they were from the same village in Vietnam, they met each other in Hong Kong, China for the first time fell in love, and made their journey to America with $25 in their pocket and an Asian blanket, very similar to the one that I have on my bed. They made their way to Georgia, Atlanta, and this was a huge struggle for them to finally get to America and then be treated so poorly because of their broken English. And the work ethic that both my parents exuded really reflects on me, and I have always carried that. And so when my dad was a shrimp fisherman on the Gulf Coast in Texas and the war broke out in Iraq, he lost his job and he needed to make sure that he was obviously providing for us as a family. During that time frame, I was 9 years old and my dad became a drug dealer. He was caught back in 2008 and he did 10 years in prison. During that time frame, my mom was a single mother of 4 kids, providing for us, and we were so impoverished at the time, and so we had such food insecurity that we sold off all of our furniture, made stools out of these wooden planks. And there were times where, you know, like our septum tank overflooded and my mom doesn't understand English. So me and my sister would literally shove manure down our system again and pray that Drainol would just make it disappear. So it's like I've struggled through poverty, and having that notion that my parents literally came from nothing into something for me, for my siblings to thrive, that really pushes me forward. And then also in that sense, somebody was talking about collaboration. Whenever I'm looking at my menu, whenever I'm rotating with every season, I want to make sure that I'm extremely intentional with who I have on my menu. So right now I have 5 different POC small businesses, and I want to continue to rotate or like have that expression of like adding on more members onto this family that I'm creating with this menu. And I just really want to make sure that every individual that comes on to the Bistro team, which is the restaurant that I am now managing, understands the vision and understands what it is to struggle and become part of something so much more. So I don't know, I trailed off a little bit, but basically I'm really inspired by everybody, and I love this so much.
That's an inspirational. Thank you so much for sharing with such vulnerability, and I feel a little bit emotional as well. And just I can 100% see what drives you, and that connection to your family and everything that they have given to you, so that you can give back and give more to the world yourself.
Thank you.
All right, Paula, I'm going to pass it over to you.
I know. And after that, oh my gosh, Helen, you got me teared up. No, that is amazing. But it really does bring to light how much for all of us, our past and experiences, I think you can't help but live with that moving forward, and it gives you a great amount of empathy. Mine is, it's an interesting story. So I grew up in a house, my mom was an entrepreneur and my dad was an accountant. I feel like I got a little bit of both of them. My dad was very much, you know, by the numbers, by the books, go to college, get a real job. My mom was an artist. My mom was a designer. I can't draw to save my life, but I watched my mom, who had me at a very young age. I watched her go to college. I watched her graduate when I was in high school, and just seeing that moment of my mom, who was working a job, studying, you know, nights, my dad out working, but then watching her basically walk across the stage and graduate. I knew that if she could do that, like there kind of wasn't anything that I couldn't do. I got a little bit of her entrepreneurial bug, but listening to my dad wanting to get the real job, I was trying to figure out for a long time what that meant for me. I fell in love with science. And so I loved to tell my parents I was going to be a doctor, and my family that I was going to be a doctor, really because I think it made them feel good. And I liked the reaction, and they were going to leave me alone otherwise. But I realized when I was in school, I loved science, but I wasn't going to med school. There was no way. But I needed to figure out what I was going to do with this degree. I always loved beauty products, but I struggled with really sensitive skin. And so even at a young age, I was looking up ingredients and reading through cosmetic dictionaries to understand what all these things were on my products, but I still didn't kind of know how to put that together with a passion. I was just trying to fix myself. When I graduated from school, I was a little lost in what I was going to do. But I knew I was going to do something with my degree. I was being a little picky and thinking that maybe I just wanted to go find a beauty company to work for. And that was hard, and I couldn't find any connections, and I wasn't moving to New York. I went to college in Oregon, but I grew up in Inglewood, California. I grew up in South LA. I was back in South LA, and there weren't a ton of opportunities, but my father had said to me, and it's a piece of advice that I carry to this day. He said, Paula, the people I know in this world who are most successful are those who are open to opportunities. So I'd like for you to stop setting your sights for yourself so narrow, because you don't know what the future can hold if you just open yourself up. And that was the idea of me taking a risk, right, on things that I didn't know. But I carried that advice, and I ended up, my first job, I went to apply to be a lab assistant. You know, that's basically washing beakers and taking care of things in a lab. But it was for a food and beverage company. And I was asked what I wanted to do 10 years from then. And I remember telling my soon-to-be boss that this probably isn't the politically correct answer, but I want to work in the beauty space. I want to help to create products that not only help people like me with darker skin, but sensitive skin. I just want to create better things. And he looked at me and he laughed and he said, you know, it's funny that you say that, because there's so much crossover between food, beverage, and cosmetics that if you get really good and you do the things that I asked you to do, there won't be anything that you can't formulate, and we'll teach you. And so I took a leap of faith, and I trusted that they would teach me those skills. And it was hard work, and I spent a lot of extra hours, but I started to watch my career really blossom pretty quickly. And I got really good at product development. But I reached a point very early on where I could go into stores, because they did work for a lot of really large manufacturers, large companies, big name companies. And I got to a point where I could walk into the store and see products that I had created or developed for those brands. And I started to ask myself, well, how did that happen? Because that's very different than me formulating and helping them scale the product. And I decided that I was going to be open to opportunities and to learn more. So I went back and got an MBA. But around that time, this thing was nudging at me. The entrepreneurial bug was nudging at me. I was really comfortable. I was climbing the corporate ladder, but this feeling I just couldn't shake. And so one day I looked at one of those store shelves, and I decided I was tired of seeing products that I had developed sitting on store shelves. Yet as a woman who loved beauty products, I was still struggling to find products that worked for me. And I knew I could do something about it. So that's when I took the leap.
Well, I love that story. And I think there's the open opportunities. I think I'm curious if everyone has experienced that here, but yeah, I think it's kind of, you're shifting, you're pivoting, you're listening, you have your ear to the ground, and it's kind of figuring out what's going to work at the right time to keep the business moving forward and onward and upward. So thank you for sharing that. And I think the curiosity piece too, of thinking my product got to this shelf and how did that happen? And I can make that happen. That's really cool. So the next question that I have for all of you is, what is the one thing that has surprised you the most about founding, leading, or operating your own business? And let's see, maybe Jill, will go over to you first.
I have been surprised and delighted of how many people are willing to help. You know, I feel like I can reach out to people and ask for help about just about anything. And there's, you know, people just really want to see us succeed. And, you know, not that there isn't just, heaps of resistance and challenges that are really hard, but I am really pleased, you know, particularly like at the beginning of the pandemic, it just blew my mind. We'd only been in business for 18 months at that point. But the response of the community of just, you know, we had to close our tasting rooms, obviously, and, you know, started a booze through, and like we're making cocktail kits that you could drive into the parking lot. We bring it out to your car, and just like, you know, people didn't have to support that. They could go get really cheap booze, and, you know, but I that has really inspired me. And it's just kind of allowed me sometimes, like when there is something I don't know how to solve, just trust, like, I'm not in this alone. Yes, I started my business, and a lot of times it feels lonely, but we're not doing this alone. Like there's just so much energy and positivity and people out there that want to chip in and help however they can.
300%. I think community is so key. And I think that's also a huge thank you for all of you to come together to foster connections with our community right now, today, inspiring others and sharing the story. And so it's really beautiful. So thank you. Nina, I'm going to pass it over to you.
So one thing that surprised me, I think more so in me helping other people scale their companies, because I work with about half first-time entrepreneurs and then half CEOs, executive leaders of large companies. So I get to see a wide variety of leadership styles. And I think one thing that I found, particularly in the pandemic, that surprised me is that everyone has inadequacy syndrome. Now, that's very different than imposter syndrome, because imposter syndrome is about this idea that we don't belong. Take a look around this room. None of us belong in senior leadership. That pathway wasn't created for us. So I just dispel that myth altogether. I don't belong because there wasn't a model in recent history that allowed me to move down a pathway. Now, inadequacy is a whole different thing. That's about your capabilities. That's not about belonging. And every single leader has this. Even the leaders I admire the most, when I'm hired by a Fortune 500 company in the pandemic, they're crying and telling me, I don't think I can do this anymore. It's humbling, and it's really incredible to see people at these high heights struggling with believing if they're enough. And guess what? We are. We're more than enough. That's why we're doing what we're doing. Just the sheer passion that we have to be able to get up and fight the 2 o'clock in the morning, you know, anxieties, and to continue to help and grow this world, that we are beyond enough. So that's just one thing that's really surprised me and humbled me. And then the other thing is just this idea of who you are, right? In corporate America and in the world. I've always been like a challenger. That's just who I am. I was a child that asked precocious questions. I was kind of annoying. I wanted to be right. And I found that instead of that being a negative, I could turn that into a positive. So my Enneagram archetype is the challenger. And we're not the popular ones. We're a very small percentage of the world, but we are also the catalyst that allows for other people to grow. And we encourage that type of growth. And so I was really like the fish in the forest. There's this famous quote that says, if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it's going to live its entire life feeling that stupid. And I felt like I was a fish in a forest. And until I found out that I could be in a river and I can swim upstream and how powerful I was, I didn't know who I really was. And so that's just something that surprised me, is like when we actually dig into ourselves and accept ourselves fully, that imposter syndrome goes away, that inadequacy syndrome goes away, and everything is just exciting because you're excited to grow and you're excited to help others grow.
Oh, Nina.
Yeah.
Yeah, uplifting. And kind of had just a moment of unlock in my brain too about kind of, you know, I didn't find myself in the entrepreneurial space first. I tried to sort of climb the corporate ladder, so to speak, and really feel like I am who I am, or who I truly am today. Now, being at Avenue and having an amazing team, wonderful clients, a fantastic community, whole different experience. Well, Helen, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Oh man, I had a thought, but then Nina just, she took it away. So I think the biggest surprise for me, and it's not necessarily a surprise to me, but I think it is for a lot of other individuals, is that everything in this world is negotiable. No matter if it's written, set in stone, if there's a will, there is definitely a way. Whenever I go into meetings where I'm negotiating a price or whatever else, you know, I have my intentions very clear, is the benefit of my company, the benefit of our people, and what is it that it's going to take to get us there. And honestly, I always shoot for higher. No matter if my number is going to be met, I shoot for the damn sky, because no matter what, if I ask, then the biggest thing that they could say is no. But at least I asked, and I will never have a regret of, you know, just leaving that alone. So that to me, I feel like a lot of people should, I guess, in a sense, realize is that that's always something that you can go back on and being like, you know what, I don't feel comfortable with that. Let's revisit that. Let's see what we can do and improvise. Improvising is a huge thing, especially because of COVID. So that was my other thing. So negotiating and improvisation. So no matter how much you prepare in life and you write out a goddamn list, I'm sorry, I cuss a lot. I'm a chef. No matter how much you prepare, no matter how many days in advance you are, there's a term in the culinary world, it's called mise en place, which means everything has a place, everything has its organization. And as long as you prepare ahead of time, it should, in theory, go smoothly, but it doesn't. Somebody can call out that morning, somebody can be sick, there's a family emergency. How are you going to shift and really thrive in that setting? Are you going to crumble under the pressure, or are you going to rise to the occasion? And for me, that is something that I've constantly have been struggling and trying to overcome. And even though it feels like everything is against you and you're taking 10 steps back, what is it going to look like to take that leap and get a little bit further up on that scale? So that to me is what it is.
Thank you. Wow, these are all such incredible insights and just experience shares. I'm blown away. So let's see, Alexis, I'm going to call on you for this one, and then we'll go to Paula. And we actually have a ton of panel or attendee questions. So I'm going to move to those great questions after this one. So Alexis, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. I want to amplify just the power of community, because I don't think I would be where I am today without people who've supported me both intentionally and unintentionally in their behavior. But I also think what continues to surprise me is what happens when people who haven't historically been given a chance, what we're able to accomplish when we're able to take up space, and how the world can be such a better place when we offer opportunity for folks who create diversity in that space. And I think for me, particularly, I've been impressed with my capacity for growth. Like, I've done things I thought I could never do. I've learned things I thought I could never learn. And I've been in spaces and places that doors were previously locked and closed to me. And so I think to your point, Nina, around this inadequacy, I think it's literally changing my brain in how I see myself and people who look like me and what's possible. That when we're given the space, the place, and the resources, we're able to succeed and excel beyond our ancestors' wildest dreams. And I just want to always remember that nothing, anything is possible and everything is negotiable. My grandma used to tell me, like, treat everything like a garage sale, like get it at a discount and charge the highest price. We got to advocate for ourselves.
Those are great. Thank you, Alexis. Paula.
I want to comment on that really quickly, because you said your grandma said treat everything like a garage sale. My mom would go to Fred Meyer's. It is set in stone, and she'd be like, count 20%, I buy now. And I'm like, Mom, no. And somehow this woman will pull it off. I'm like, how is this possible? And it's just like seeing my mom do it consistently. And at first I felt super shameful of it. And I was like, oh my God, she's doing it again. But now I take so much pride. I have no shame whatsoever. I ask as many questions as possible. And if I look like an idiot, so be it. But at least I've tried.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Helen, that is so true. And you said the worst that they can say is no. That's something that my father used to say to me all the time, especially when I was scared to go do something. He's like, what's the worst they're going to say is no. And guess what? When they say no, you'll still live and you'll go on and, do whatever it is you want to do anyway. So don't be so worried about that. For me, I've been surprised at how comfortable I've gotten with being uncomfortable. You know, if you think about how I started my career in numbers, right? And in formulas, and there are some absolutes. And yeah, formulas don't always work, but they can always be adjusted to get them to where you need to go. But it's kind of like a set routine. You know, running a business, someone told me the minute that you write the business plan and finish it, the business plan is gonna become obsolete and it's gonna be time to write it again. And I was like, no, are you kidding me? This is like my Bible. It'll carry me through. But so many things have happened, so many things unforeseen, whether it was the industry or COVID or teams not or team members not necessarily working out the way I would have hoped, or any of those things, or having to shift. I've been really surprised at how comfortable I've gotten with being uncomfortable. Now things happen and it's like, okay, we'll figure it out. We'll deal with it. Doesn't mean I like it. And again, doesn't mean it's comfortable. Doesn't mean I even want to deal with it, but I know that I can. And so it's that idea of learning just my capacity, and that there really aren't limits. The only limit is the limit that I place on myself.
So good. Thank you, Paula. All right, so we're at about 15 more minutes, and I'm going to move over to audience questions, and just thank you to audience who submitted questions. And I think for this round, maybe just have panelists jump in. So if the question speaks to you, feel free to just jump in or raise your hand. And so the first question is, with Portland being a predominantly white city, how have you all found a community that supports your businesses?
If I may speak, for me, I make that community. So what I was saying about like the menu and featuring more individuals, like I seek them out instead of looking for it, because I feel like there is a large predominant white community here in Portland, and there are some that are very extremely supportive, but what is it to highlight POC? What is it to highlight AAPI, people that have struggled and haven't seen the opportunities that our white counterparts have had?
Yeah, and I think for me, I have been born and raised in the Portland metro area. So I've been collecting my community for a while, but I've seen the city grow and expand so much over the last 10 years, specifically around the Black population. And similar to Helen, I just really lean into bringing people closer, where it might just be a networking lunch, or I see someone at an event, I make a point to connect with them, acknowledge them, and then build an authentic relationship. And hopefully we have things that are in common. And if nothing else, we have something in common, that we're Black and in Portland, which there is so few of us here. And so I just really enjoy meeting new people. And then I think when people care about me or care about my vision, then they begin to care about my business. But I'm not going into communication or relationships thinking, how can this person better my business? I think, how can this person better my life?
Right.
For me,
the
it's
next
kind of, oh, I was just going to answer that really quick.
Yeah.
I know you got a lot of questions. For me, it's also about being intentional about showing up for people. So I've made a point in my work that anytime I can connect, I'm going to connect. Outside of my business, I've made a point. So I'm a business commissioner for the state now, and it is really important for me to advocate for businesses that I can sincerely empathize with, women-owned businesses run by people of color, and trying to shed light and to be a voice for those businesses. I feel like that is a great way to support. And then any way else that I can support, I will do, because I know at the end of the day, those folks and businesses will also be advocates for us. And so it's the idea of championing one another, I think, and lending our voices is really important in a place where you might not predominantly see people who look like you or do what you do.
Yeah.
I also feel like white people use this excuse a lot of, why don't you have a more diverse staff? And they're like, oh, well, it's, Portland's so white. Portland isn't that white. Like, we've got more people entering kindergarten that are of color than that are white. And I think it's like, no, like, look harder, like, try harder. Like, I think we need to like move beyond that excuse.
100%. Thank you for calling that out, Jill.
And to add to that, I think what I hear a lot from, we talk about like employment and communities and where are people, the unicorns in Portland. I hear a lot from employers now about the Great Resignation. I'm like, I've heard this at least 3 times, that people just don't want to work. Like, oh, these people just don't want to work. And it's like, no, maybe they just don't want to work for you.
Yeah.
And so we're here. People are here and they want to intentionally connect. And the irony is, I'm coming from the East Coast into Portland, and Portland is an amazing place to build a business. It's literally and figuratively a fertile ground. And maybe it takes an outsider to see that and to value that. But we have more in common here, the people that choose to come here and stay here, particularly for the natural resources, than we do not in common. So we need to start to dig into those deep relationships and those deep values to see that we're here and that we can connect. But you have to be intentional about it. So I totally agree with what you're saying, Jill.
Yeah. So I'm actually along those lines. Next question is, what have been the most effective ways for you all to connect with Portlanders? And maybe it's other entrepreneurs, maybe it's mentors, maybe it's coaches, maybe it's customers, community. Has it been websites, events, social media? Curious your take on that.
I think for me, one thing that has been really helpful, and it really just amplifies what Paula was saying, is showing up for community and going to events that are hosted by folks who want to make an impact, whether it's with communities of color, specifically around women. And typically, we're talking about values aligned. Typically, people go to those events because they align with the values that is represented. And that's where I find people who I want to connect with further. I haven't really found success on social media, but maybe someone else can speak to that. I find the biggest success really being in person or in virtual networking, where you can really connect with someone a bit more intimately.
Mm-hmm.
So what I like to do is going to the events that you were saying, Alexis, is like My People's Market. I actually used to be a vendor there. Going to Renegade, my Portland night market, and connecting with the vendors. And for me, I love utilizing social media as a platform of recognizing others. So if I do see a company that like I really love, I love their product, I will start to put them on my story. I'll make sure to be like, hey guys, they're going to be here from 5 to 9. Make sure to check them out. Here's the owners' names, and just run through that system. I also really love to go out. I make it a point to go out each weekend and try out a new food spot, like a new restaurant that's opening, or whatever else, and making sure to take photos and having them recognized and tagging them, obviously. So those are my 2 biggest things that I constantly am staying cautious of and aware of to help out my POC businesses here in Portland. Yeah.
Fantastic.
If I could, someone asked a really interesting question, and I hope that's Christy Comstock. If it is, hello. They asked it to Anna, and I think Anna loves to be a bit in the shadows, and she's an amazing entrepreneur. That's why this entire webinar exists. And they had asked for you to just talk about your values and your journey. And Avenue is celebrating their 6th anniversary this year. So I just want to throw that question back to our host for a second.
Let's go, Anna.
Yeah, Nina, thank you so much. And it's trying to moderate all these questions. And thank you. And Christy, hello. Thank you for the question. And yes, I think that's kind of true. And it's interesting when I think back on my journey into my career and thinking that entrepreneurship, like I mentioned earlier, wasn't really something that even crossed my mind. If you'd even asked me 8 years ago, and Nina said 6 years on Friday, we're celebrating our 6-year anniversary, if I start a business, I probably would have said no. And I think it's because I just did not think that something like that was possible, to run a business, to lead a company, to grow something, bigger than yourself. And I think it was a culmination of just experiences along the way where 100% I got great experience at all the companies that I worked at and was an employee at. But at the end of the day, there was something missing. And I think maybe that's a lot of times entrepreneurs look up, sort of heads down, look up and think, okay, there's something missing here. And part of it was around the people and culture, and feeling like people really weren't supported in the organizations that I had been a part of. And there was sort of one end goal, and it wasn't necessarily in the best interest of employees or in the best interest of the community. And so when I finally had the sort of the timing that to start Avenue, it was really my values were all around one, community, and we actually have 3 core values at Avenue, and they're aligned with the company and the team. But at the end of the day, I think that they've really started at my core. And one is build a community together. And I think that along the way in my personal career journey, it's been the people I've met who've helped me, who have given me great advice, who've connected me to other people. It's the clients, it's the team members I've worked with. And then secondarily, leave things better than when you found it. So I think as an entrepreneur, always thinking about how can we do things better or change things up, have a greater impact for our clients. And so for me, it's, how can we always improve things as we go, and never think that we're perfect, that we always can do something differently, and it doesn't have to stay status quo. We can think about other ways of doing things. And the final one is around, oh my goodness, why these are my own core values, are, fearlessly do what's right. And so this one really is one and I think, Nina, you alluded to it, you know me well, of just being more on the introverted personality type as a human, as a person, and how that maybe defined me in the earlier parts of my career. But I think moving forward, I thought about, I want to stand up for what I believe. I want my company to stand up for what we believe. I never want to be afraid of, the clients that we're working with or the work that we're doing. I want to 100% feel like we stand behind that. And that, we will actually tell a client if we think that what they're doing isn't the right thing for their business, and, vice versa. I think across the board, we just want to put people in a better place. And I guess the final thing is taking care of team members. That's kind of a number one priority of me. For me, I don't think Avenue could exist without the amazing team that we have. And so I constantly am thinking, how can I invest back into the team who are investing so much in our clients, who are in turn investing in our community? So very short, sweet, but thank you, Nina. And final question, just to kind of wrap things up, is around if there's one quick piece of advice that you would have for either your past self and in the current state, or for entrepreneurs out there in the audience today, or people who are thinking about starting their own business or taking the leap, is there one piece of advice that you might have for everyone?
Don't do it. I often answer that though, like if somebody says, should I start my own business? I'm like, absolutely not. Unless it's you can't help yourself, like you wake up and you just can't stop thinking about it. Maybe throughout the day you convince yourself not to, but if you wake up and you're still thinking about it, that's when I think you make the leap, isn't when it's just your gut won't let you not do it. Mm-hmm. But if you can talk yourself out of it, then don't do it. And with advice, I have a kiddo, and that's what a bit really pushed me over the edge, is what would I tell Charlie to do? And that is the advice I come back to with myself all the time, is I tell him to go for it. And I want to hold myself to the same thing of, yeah. So the kiddo is always in my head of what would I tell, what kind of advice would I give my kid, and why do I deserve anything less than that?
That's great.
I would say I'm going to add a different perspective to that. I agree with that. It's really scary to start your own business or to be an entrepreneur, but there's also never been a better time in history, in American history, to be an entrepreneur. So in the course of this entire webinar, in about an hour, 70 millionaires have been created, most of which are entrepreneurs. It's a 103% increase in the past decade. There isn't a better time to be quote unquote rich or to start an entrepreneurial business than now. I think of my ancestors who did this without Google, and I don't my brain doesn't go there. I can't understand it. We have literally the world at our fingertips and all the information ever known to man at the click of a button. So if you're thinking about it, try it. Like Alexis said, you can always go back to your day job. And there are people here that, yes, I'm talking to you, you know who I'm talking to, that I think should have their own business. I think are depriving the world from their gifting by staying kind of in their corporation or hiding in their team when they should be out there living out their passion and impacting the world.
Yeah, and I would say you don't have to do it alone. I think we receive messages that we should be these strong individuals and we should have all the answers. And I think that, well, from my personal experiences, you don't. You just have to really curate that community or that village around you. Who's the finance person, who's the HR person, who's the data person, and you just get to follow your vision and your passion and curate those supports.
That's so important.
Yeah, really important. I would just add on to the back of what Alexis said. When you have that vision, be demanding. Because there are times where people will want to lend advice and that's great, but you've got to be very careful about the advice that you take. You don't want to look back and realize that you have ended up on a path or in a direction that was never, ever, ever intended for your original vision. Because without that vision, I don't think you'll really have the wherewithal to get through. There are high highs, but the low lows of running a business. So you've got to have a vision and be demanding about what that vision is.
Love that, Paula.
Mm-hmm.
If I may, for me, I think the biggest advice that I'd love to give is be unconventional. You don't have to have a degree. You don't have to be to the T of what systemically what people think should happen, you know, like finish high school, go to college, do this, do that. For me, it's all about vision. If you have something that is completely unique that no one has out there, entrepreneurship is about being different, is about setting this blaze forward and what does it look like to be completely different from everybody else. Mm-hmm. And if you want to be, you know, not saying that this is a bad thing at all, but like in a rat race where you're consistently in this system that, quite frankly, the white man has systematically put on us all individually, when you break free from that and realize that there's so much else in life, like there's kids on YouTube that are making millions. Like, how the hell is that possible? It's because it's outside of the box. And when you do that, there's so many more opportunities that come your way.
Thank you so much, all of you. And I know we're at noon. I just want to thank everyone for joining us today. And a huge thank you to our panelists for sharing your experiences with us, how your values have guided you throughout your journeys. Alexis, Nina, Paula, Helen, and Jill, I learned a ton from you today. And it was so great to hear from each of you. And from all of us at Avenue, I just want to say we appreciate the time you took to give back to your community and share your personal journeys and just inspire all of us out in the audience to potentially go out and make the leap. And thanks for those statistics, Nina. Those are very helpful.
Love that.
Our next panel is taking place on Wednesday, June 22nd at 11 a.m. and we'll spotlight experiences and stories from some of Portland's digital influencers. And you can register on our website at avenueagency.com/events. And this is our first panel, so we'd love to hear feedback from our attendees. We'll be sending out a quick survey via email for everyone that registered, and we would love to get your thoughts, your feedback, you know, what was your biggest takeaway from the panel, and hope to make the future panels as beneficial to all and inspire continued learning and connection with our community. So with that, I just want to say thank you, so much gratitude for all of you, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Anna.
Thanks so much. Thanks,
Happy
Anna.
anniversary.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.